Aleph, we're beginning Ha'oichel b'Yom HaKippurim ma'cholin ha'royin le'echol. If a person eats in Yom Kippur food which is edible la'odam for a person, kikoiseves hagaso, which is like a large date, shipchusa mikebeya gemat, which is a bit less than the size of an egg. We'll go to the Peirush below. Usually we have two measures. One is kezayis, which is an olive size, and one is kebeya, which is double an olive. And this koseves agasa is an in-between between the two of them. Now, what are you liable? He's chayav if he eats it willfully. He's liable for kores, being cut off. And if he did it unintentionally, he has to bring a chatos. The Maggid Mishnah cites a Mishnah Yuma 73b. If somebody eats a large date, we measure it not only the soft part of it, but also the pit is part of the measurement. He's chayav, he's liable. In other words, you don't have to eat one type of food. Any food would be a piece of apple, a piece of bread, a piece of egg. It's all becomes a koseves. And we see that only if he ate that from a food which is edible for man. But if he ate food that's not edible for man, we'll see what the rule is regarding them. The reason that's forbidden to eat in Yom Kippur, a larger measure than as a kezayis, and it's different than all the other forbidden things in the Torah, like fats or a pig, which is an olive's size. Rae Gann says, since it doesn't say in the Torah lo yiseichal, and it says kol nefesh asher lo yisochel lo yisuune will not be tormented. So we see that the obligation is a eating which takes a person out of feeling that he's starving, and that is a larger size than an olive's. They write that this measure of a koseves is the same for any sized person, but whether he be a dwarf, whether he be a giant like Oig Melech HaBoshen. The reason is brought down the Gemara that both of them have, it causes the stomach to be comfortable. But just that for a dwarf, it happens after a greater length of time. He has it only for a short time. In other words, by the dwarf, he will be satiated, or at least the craving for eating will stop for a longer period of time than it will for the giant. But less than this measure, no one has this his cravings stopped. All of the foods can be included in that. Rae Gann writes, according to the Rambam, that even if he didn't eat them all in one swallow, but he ate from each one a mustard seed size and many different species until they amount to this size within the period of time, which is called achilas pras, and we'll see what that measurement is. It's a third of a bread. As we go along, we'll see. In they explain that on Yom Kippur, if you eat this size of a koseves agasa, this large date, he's liable. The task questions, why does the Torah tell us that a koseves agasa is liable? You're not allowed to eat anything on Yom Kippur, because even half of a measure is forbidden. The only difference is if you didn't eat that shiur, that measurement, he's liable to bring a korban chatos if he did it unwittingly. And the answer is that there's a difference in what we learn in Siman 6:18, that a sick person who needs to eat on Yom Kippur, if it's possible, you give him less than this amount. Meaning there are people who, as they age or they're sick or under different circumstances, must eat. So you give them less than this amount, or you do it in over a period of time where they won't be considered having been eaten in one measure of time. Therefore, we have to know the calculation of how to calculate this measure. The measure of a kabeya of an egg that's brought here, the Maggid Mishnah says that according to the conclusion of the Gemara, it's less than an egg a little bit. And so we find Hilchos Erevin. Rabbeinu Moshe Milonel questions, Rabbeinu Manoach questions, why doesn't the Rambam tell us what we find in Yerushalmi, that you have to push if to know the measurement, you have to take, there's a gap between the seed and the outer skin, or the outer flesh of the date. And why does he mention that you don't count that volume in the volume? And Rabbeinu Manoach answers, since the Rambam says the shiur is a little bit less than a bekebeya, so you don't really have to know how to measure the date, because we have a definite definitive measurement. It's a little bit less than a egg. The halacha is that you do not count the empty space between the pit and the date is not mentioned in Shulchan Aruch either in Hilchos Yom HaKippurim, but it's mentioned in Hilchos Pesach. There the Rambam writes that when you eat moro, that you have to eliminate the airspace of the vegetable and figure out what the volume would be in the actual edible food, and not in the ear that's in it. And Magen Avraham says that you always have to measure without the ear, and so as the rule would apply to matzah. If it would have ear in it, the ear space is not considered part of the measurement. And see Mishnayos Oktzen, very Beis Mishnah Ches. The Ogam Avovo comes up with an interesting thought that when we say it's less than an egg, we're not talking about the egg itself, but with its shell, but rather without its shell. And look in Shuvas Rabbi Yehuda, the Gro, and Shulchan Aruch Chaim 486. The Rambam says Kebeya is without its eggshell, and therefore this explains many questions that here we can't get involved with. Rambam continues, if somebody drinks liquids, so we're going to shtias odom, that a person could drink them, that they're basically a person's drink. Here the measurement is how much the mouth is filled with. Everyone according to his cheeks. Now, here liquid is different than the measurement of food. We said food is the measurement of a large date, both for a dwarf and both for a giant. But when it comes to drinking, everyone goes according to his cheeks. Rae Gann brings to the Gemara, Chazal knew that this is the case with regarding drinking, that a person's thirst only quiets down when it is a full cheekful. And how much? What does it mean? A mouthful. That's if you take everything in your mouth, you'll see one cheekful on the side, and not that his mouth should be totally packed with water. It's enough to have it show it on one side. The Rambam continues, when it comes to a normal person, it's a bit less than a revius. It's about a quarter of a liter. All that you can have, you can drink coffee with tea, with apple juice. As long as you come with this measure, you have transgressed. However, we do not combine, for example, a half. If he ate half the size of a large date, and he drank half the size of a revius, if he's in middle, they cannot be calculated together. It's not considered one shiur because they do not combine. In Hilchos Yom Kippur, Shulchan Aruch writes that if you drink on Yom Kippur, M'loi lugmov, and the Rambam explains that means according to every person, according to the size of his mouth, a larger person because of large, and a small person according to his small stature, and it doesn't mean full mouth, but it means you should be able to put it to one side, and you'll see that it's full of the cheek, and this is less than a regular revius, as we learned in the Rambam, according to the Gemara.